Okay, so Julie, why don't you, since this is a My Business page, tell people a little bit about you and your work with feral and fearful dogs in
My
general.
undertakings.
Yeah.
I started fostering dogs about 12, 13 years ago. And my first foster dog was a fearful dog, and he was returned twice, and no one else could connect with him. But I happened to not have a fenced yard at the time, which I think really helped because his problem was he'd go hide in the yard and no one could get him to come in. And I just kind of took him around the house, and within 2 weeks he was following me around, and I really connected with the dog. And so that kind of just started me fostering kind of, I would say, easier cases of fearful dogs. Working with rescue, adopting them out, training fosters, and then I have my own dog training business. But I kind of got this huge immersion in the kind of more severe cases about 3 years ago. There was a big hoarding case in New Mexico, which B works at the shelter. And we called in the big guns, Nelson, for help. And he came out and did the workshop there. And I mean, fortunately or unfortunately, whichever way you look at it, I've gotten a lot of practice because there's a lot of dogs in New Mexico that are like this. And so I usually have a couple of these cases going either at the shelter or in our rescue that I'm working with. And so, I mean, just over that course of time, I've just gotten some experience. I wouldn't say I have all the answers by any means, because I think each dog is different and each dog is a unique challenge and also has different attributes. So yeah, and I wanted to do this today because I see a lot of people struggling on Facebook. I read applications. If you guys don't know, I work for Jason as his admin, and also a couple other trainers. And I see their clients' applications come in, and they're just really struggling with their dogs. And I know there's a lot of people out there that aren't even going to reach out to a trainer. So I just wanted to get a resource out there for people that's free and accessible.
Okay. So for people that are joining my page from Julie's world, and maybe or just found this through being shared, my name's Jason. This is my page, K9 Cohen, and I work in Brooklyn. So a lot of behavior modification and a lot of fearful dogs, and that's why I went to learn from many people, including Nelson and Julie, more about working with fearful dogs at workshops out in New Mexico, which you just mentioned, and other workshops with Nelson as well. I also partner and work with Korean Canine Rescue, which gets a lot of dogs from Korea that are also very fearful. And that's one of the first times I really reached out to Nelson going, this dog's not taking food. This dog's not what I'm used to many moons ago. And then had a nice conversation with Nelson that led to the first Facebook Live like this with that. Also, being in New York, different situation. Most of us don't have a backyard, or if we do, it's about that big. And even when you're in the backyard, it's noises and stuff like that. So there's another set of challenges of having a dog that might be fine in suburbia, the country, but in the city, there's many more layers of stress. And just walking outside, they're beyond threshold. So during this conversation, and maybe how this goes, we might do other ones on specific topics, but I feel this is a conversation we need to have more. It's not like training the typical dog that, okay, we want to teach them basic obedience. We have to consider other things. Things are a lot of times slower. And in the city, we also have to look at things differently because of once they walk outside, they're past threshold. So it's a challenge. Different tools sometimes, different methods. So me and Julie, as we mentioned in the title for this, We don't do things all the same way. We don't agree on everything, but we agree on the same
The
direction we have to
basics.
go and how to get there, but maybe do things a little differently. And part of that is my limitations in the city and the added stressors as well.
Yeah.
So we'll take questions. We do want to go over a few topics um, that we wanted to just address. We know we're not going to get through all of this. That's what we thought, maybe once a month or every so often, maybe we jump on again, because there's so much to talk about and have other guests and Nelson back on here and other people. They're just really, let's delve into fearful dogs. It's not the same. And the more I'm into it, the better I like it, because when you see a fearful dog gain that confidence, be able to live in the world and not just be stuck in the home and see the world and gain that confidence and live as full a life as they can, there's no better feeling. But
No.
there's different avenues to address that. It's not the typical. So, Julie, we talked about earlier, maybe we start the conversation on where you more specialize in, which is when dogs get brought into the shelter and they're feral or fearful, and how can the people in the shelter understand them a little better and help them during their stay, and also make them more adoptable. And then maybe we'll go on to talking more about getting them into the foster and into the adopter home and where we do there, depending on time and questions. So
Yeah, and I mean, I'm very lucky here because the shelters I work at, I guess, have trusted me to kind of experiment a little and do my own thing. So that's the first caveat, is if you go into a shelter, the larger shelters already have behaviorists and they have more rules, I guess. But I'm lucky because the shelters here are small and we get to know each other and it's a more intimate setting. So honestly, there's a couple things I need a dog to do before we can get it into a foster home. I'm not going to give my foster homes a completely feral dog. So I want to have a couple skills. One, the biggest one is walking on a leash. Because, you know, they need to use a leash to get it outside to go potty or to get in from the yard or to take it to the vet. And just to start to broaden that dog's horizons, the leash is the most important thing. So generally when I would go up to the shelter, that would be the thing I would work on. However, while you're doing that, you can instill a lot of trust between the handler and the dog, and showing the dog, you know, that people aren't going to hurt it, or hey, we might actually do fun things together, right? Because you get to get out and go on a walk. And so those two kind of go hand in hand for me. Where the shelter is, there's a big field in the front and there's not a lot of things around there to go to, not that I would anyway. So that's basically where I would work in. And I would say, and B, who is on here, has had huge success with these dogs working in a shelter environment. And you don't have to even work with them every day. I mean, I would go up like once every 2 weeks because it's 2 hours away from where I live. And even in that length of time, the dogs would remember me. They would remember what we did and we could build upon it. So, you know, you can work with what you have and you don't have to think it is this ideal situation. I would say the things I see a lot that I think may actually be setting the dogs back is the overuse of food. And then what I mean by that is depending on food to form a trust level that I don't think can be achieved by getting the dog out and doing things.
Julie, I just want to pause. We talked about this yesterday. I want to sort of
by getting too detailed.
No, I want to talk food, meds, stuff like that.
Right.
Because if not, it'll be just, okay, let's just go on one rant on everything. So what I want to try to do, so we can get through some top line of stuff, is really just for people watching, or to make this a resource for later, A new dog comes into the shelter. Let's just from your expertise. What are the few do's and don'ts? You talked about the leash. Well, dogs coming in, maybe if especially the shelter you go to, other ones, but dogs maybe not been on leash. Should they use slip leash? Or slip leash is bad. Just a few things for the shelter. I definitely want to cover food. I know we work things a little differently. I definitely want to talk meds. I definitely want to talk a bunch of things that we mentioned, but I want to sort of stay on track so we can maybe, let's talk right now, getting the dog into the shelter and go from there. So
I would say, so let them decompress for 3 days, right? And just feed them, give them water, let them get used to things. A lot of the dogs, like you said, have never been on a leash before. If they have, it may have been a long time. A lot of these dogs are maybe dumped somewhere and then are, free roaming for a year or two.
Yep.
Who knows? But we use slip leads because one, I can get them on the dog and I can also get them off the dog the easiest. I prefer as soon as possible to change that to a martingale because it doesn't tighten around the neck the same way. And it can eliminate some panic. But at the beginning, sometimes you can't get that on and off of the dog. So harnesses, don't use them because it's too invasive to put them on. And I also find they're not very secure. And that's another consideration, right? Is the dog has to be safe. That's the number one priority for me, is not to lose a dog when I'm at the shelter. And a few have escaped out of their kennels, but then that's all fenced in. So I always work inside the fenced area until the dog is safe to take off out of that area.
And people that are watching this that don't know Julie, and we'll have links later, but on her website, Rescue Dog Responsibly, and on her YouTube channel, she has videos on how to properly get a slip leash on a fearful dog and a lot of resources on that topic. We can maybe address that another time, but I just wanted to pop in there. There are video resources that later are for that. So one, what you're saying is get them out. Well, first give them a few days to decompress.
Yeah.
Best you can, get a slip leash on, then a martingale, and then get them out for just a walk. And I work with a lot of dogs from down south, and even the ones down south, a lot of times they've never been really on leash either, just backyard or in the country.
Sure.
So in the shelter environment, how can they build trust with the dog in a shelter environment, like where you're at, or where they're in runs, and the dog's just stuck in the corner? What are some just top line things you can do or that are important to consider with helping a dog in a shelter environment before they go to foster or even get adopted from that place?
I would say to be cautious about how you're approaching the dog. Even if you're walking in the run to give the dog food, don't make direct eye contact. There's a way to open a kennel as non-threatening as possible to the dog. And a lot of people don't think about this stuff. They just are opening it and maybe they're looking at the dog while they're opening it. But you can open it and come in sideways and then put the food bowl down without even looking at the dog. That sort of stuff tells the dog you're not going to hurt it. Approaching slowly, that sort of thing. Just being cautious of your movements. And I'm more cautious with a brand new dog than I am later. We kind of phase that out. So it's not like you have to be this aware for the dog's, existence. But the first few days are really important, that you establish that people aren't a threat. The good things about shelters is that there's multiple people there handling the dogs and interacting with the dogs. So if, like, for example, here at my house, it's only me and my husband, right? So it's limited. But at the shelter, if everyone can get on board and kind of approaching the dog the same way and doing things in a non-threatening way, the dog learns that it can trust more than just one person. So that would be
Why
my,
don't we maybe pause and talk a little bit about that specific thing, which is how we approach. I mean, we're not going
right.
to move around here on the thing, but the basic things of what is threatening to a dog that most people think, well, I'm just going to go and go, hey, sniff my hand. But from
No.
a dog's perspective, yeah, you want me to bite it? But in a shelter environment, it's more runs than crates, I would think, most shelters, right?
Yeah.
So when you're
Well,
approaching,
here,
what can you recommend? You said no eye contact. Well, then what do I do? What would people do when they're sort of entering the run to make you not a threat? And then maybe we talk a little bit about, in general, how approaching a dog correctly can make a world of difference.
yeah, and I mean, this applies everywhere, not just in a kennel run. But, you know, first of all, I don't look at the dog when I approach the door to unlock it. I'm looking at the lock. I'm just doing what I need to do. I'm not like looking or talking to the dog. And then I open the door and I usually go in kind of sideways. It is helpful. Sometimes I have my phone on like the reverse camera so I can see what the dog's doing, but I don't have to look at it. So that's something I do sometimes. Plus I take a lot of videos. So, but, you know, and then I kind of just squat down and hang out with the dog for a little bit. I don't just walk in, put the leash on the dog and, you know, start going. Of course, it depends on the dog, like what I'm going to do exactly. So that's where, you know, you just have to be aware and be like, oh, well, if I move this way, does it scare him? But then if I move another way, it doesn't. And usually I'll hold the leash out, let them sniff the leash. Maybe I'll put it on the floor for a little bit, let them investigate the leash. And then maybe I'll even like touch them a little bit with the leash before I put it on over their head, just so they see that this thing isn't going to hurt them. And so, you know, that whole process might take 5 minutes.
Yeah.
The bad thing about me going up there and not being there for a long period of time is I am a little bit limited, especially like when we have a lot of dogs up there that I'm working with. I am a little bit limited in the amount of time I can spend with a dog, but I still try not to rush. So, you know, if I thought the dog really needed me to stay there for 10 minutes, I would do that. I mean, I've taken 20 minutes to put a leash on a dog that was pacing, and just by gradually moving the leash closer and closer and grazing it against her. And then what else? I don't reach my hands out.
We're 20 minutes in already, and I'm keeping track of time and making sure,
Okay.
you know, before you know it, it's 3 hours. Nelson's went too, and I'm trying to. So what I've seen from your videos and stuff like that, and some things I tell my students, okay, things I got from you and Nelson and other people is first eye contact. Don't stare at the dog. As cute as they are, don't stare. Don't
Right.
be weird. Okay, we get from Heather Beck, right? Don't be weird. So what you have seen doing a lot of videos is if the dog, you're walking sort of backwards, even though not being weird, but you're sort of taking the time. And when you said let them smell the leash, it's important. Let them see with their nose what it is than with their eyes. And a lot of times the fearful dogs, we don't want them focusing with their eyes. We want them focusing with their nose.
Yeah.
But giving them something that if you're using a slip leash at a shelter, and it's probably has a lot of smells of other dogs and other things on it, things we don't want to mention either, they've been dragging through, a lot of smells on it. If you're just putting it down, like you said, it's great. So get their nose moving, nose activated, right? Okay. So you get the leash on, go for the walk. I'm going to just move a bit. So I'm just looking, I'm trying to keep track of time so we cover more of a wide audience, and maybe we can do one on each.
Yeah, because this could take 2 hours just by itself. Right?
It is. That's why when we were doing this yesterday, I was like, we gotta. So in the shelter, give them time to decompress. Let them eat. Let them be. Try to get a leash on. Take your time getting the leash on. Don't bend over them. The big thing people do is bend over and reach, and that's usually where you get bit. You're crowding a dog. The big thing I try to tell my students, and I'm assuming it's the same with you tell the shelters, is bending over, crowding them, putting yourself in a dominant position, putting them in a vulnerable position, and that's why you're sort of reaching and just giving the leash. And check out the video from her. But in general, what I tell my students is let the dog come to you the best you can. Even when you're putting the leash on, I know you sort of just hang there for a bit and maybe just drop the slip leash on and then go.
Yeah.
If your shelter is struggling with all this, get some local trainers to help you with leash handling. I know a lot of staff comes in and they learn on the job, but there's plenty of trainers that are willing to go and help if you just ask. Okay? Learning on the job is great, but get some local trainers that understand proper leash communication with the slip leash to help for the shelters. So one thing that's popular out there, before I go deeper, which I know is a great graphic and popular out there, is the 3 days, 3 weeks, and 3 months. And I think it's great. But a lot of times when I'm telling my students, I'm like, it's true and it's not true. It could be your dog and could be nothing like your dog. Every dog, as you mentioned before, is different. So when you say 3 days, they say 3 days to decompression. Some dogs might be good in 3 days. As Nelson has taught me, it's about 21 days for them to get comfortable in a situation. And what we focus on a bit more is what Nelson has said is first the dog has to learn to trust you. Take as long as it takes. The dog to trust you. Then trust you in that environment. Correct me if I'm wrong. And then trust the environment. So a lot of people go, well, I got this dog and it's been 3 days and he still doesn't want to go outside. Okay, it doesn't trust you or trust you and with the environment. So I want to talk a little bit about that graphic, and what it says is really nice. And I like that it's teaching people to have some patience. But a lot of times when you have a really more fearful or feral dog, it's not 3 days. It could be 3 weeks until to a month till you start seeing a dog comfortable with you. Or it could be 3 hours.
Yeah.
Depends on the dog, depends on you, the situation, and all that. So if you wanted to just touch base a bit on that graphic and that thing that's out there right now.
Yeah, and I think that's pretty, it's great information to know that dogs reach certain comfort levels at certain amount of time.
Yep.
And like in our rescue, we give a 2-week trial period because 2 weeks is a good time for the dog to kind of feel at home and, but it's not too long for the logistics of the rescue. With fearful dogs, I mean, just to give you an idea, and, they vary so much by what they're afraid of too. So, for example, Tipton let me rub his belly maybe in a few weeks because he figured out he really liked that, and he's kind of an opportunist. Hawkeye, it took 2 years. So it took Hawkeye 3 months to come in through my door without a leash on. And even now he'll still hesitate at the door if something weird is going on in the house. But he was also much older and also kept in a cage versus Tipton was free roaming and much younger. So there's all these things, and as long as the dog is progressing in general, I think it's good. And I don't want anyone to feel like, oh, it's been 3 weeks, my fearful dog isn't normal, I'm doing something wrong. So if it's not progressing, maybe that's time to reach out for help, after 3 months, or if the dog hasn't moved from a certain corner in the house or that sort of thing,
I hope you don't wait 3 months to reach out for help.
Well, yeah, it's like 3 days, really.
That's a good point. I mean, a lot of people wait a while.
Yeah. So.
And what I see, one of the great things Korean canine rescue work with is they have to work with a trainer right away.
Yes.
And it does help set them up for success on how to help the dog. And I know dogs previously that people would do maybe 1 session and then not. And then a year later, dog's biting people. And most of the cases I'm getting right now, our dog just bites. Majority of them, they're not aggressive dogs per se. Obviously, it's aggressive act, but they're fearful. And over time, they weren't being advocated for. They were put in situations that they were too stressed. So they can't get away, flight. They go to fight. And most of it's not trying to hurt anybody. It's get away.
Yeah.
But that works. So then they do it quicker. And now you have a dog that's the behavior they rehearse. So when I see this graphic and say, well, 3 months and now the dog's, well, there are things during those 3 months you can do to build confidence, to help, to
Yes.
gain trust. So when I see, well, 3 months they'll be fine, and waiting, it can also get worse.
Yes.
So it's again back to being a balance.
Well, and it's what habit are you building in your home with the dog? So if you're building a habit of the dog hiding under the bed in the bedroom and it doesn't come out after, 28 days, the habit gets more ingrained.
Right.
So it's going to be harder to change that habit than if you would have just brought the dog out on a leash to go potty outside and hang out with you some and then put it in a crate for a rest period. That is building a more, a braver habit, let's say, a more interactive habit. I don't know why people wait to reach out, because even the people we adopt dogs out to, I'm like, I'm here for you guys, let me know. And they don't ask questions. And I'm like, I can help you.
And right now it's, my schedule, and most of COVID, it's been 2-month wait.
Right.
And, there's things you can do in the meantime. So maybe let's talk about some things you can do before you see a trainer, or things you can do in general in foster care and in once you adopt a dog. In shelter, it's a little harder because you were talking about in shelter, you're limited on time because you have so many dogs you want to help, and just in general. But foster care, they're limited on time, but they have more because the dog's in home with them. And adopters should have not a limit of time and shouldn't need to rush. So one of the things I talk about when you first get, what we talk about is the honeymoon period when a dog first comes home. So it goes back to this 3 days, 3 months, or 3 weeks, 3 months. But a honeymoon period on the same thing is, what do we do in the first few days when they come home? And a lot of people, they get a dog. I want to take it everywhere. All my friends and family want to meet the dog. Oh, I want to show it everything. And a lot of times when you have a fearful dog, that's too much. And you got to look at the layers of stress they've already been through, the life changes they've been through. It could be medically. Maybe they were sick and they're recovering from being sick, or a heartworm, or all the shots they just got. Who knows if their stomach, how their stomach's doing, how much they were in foster care before you adopted them. New location, right? So I get dogs that come from the south and then come to the city. You get dogs that might have been feral, then went to the shelter, and now they're in a home, but that's a lot of adjustment. So each one of those needs that adjustment period. So something I tell people is, let them be, take all the pictures you want. Don't let them see you taking the pictures.
Yeah, right. Don't
you
stick the
talk
phone
about
in their
staring, right? So, if you're staring at a dog, and if you just stare at anybody long enough, they get uncomfortable. In dogs, that's a challenge and uncomfortable. And why are you staring at me? Okay, in New York, what you're looking at, right? So a lot of times what I tell people, if the dog catches you staring, look away. Why?
Yeah.
I'm not a threat. Okay? Yeah. Side body language. Don't bend over. Let the dog come to you. Okay? So some dogs don't want to be in the crate, and a lot of fearful dogs don't want to come out of the crate. And so what do we do with them? Okay, so I use food and I use the leash depending on the dog and the situation. The biggest thing I always want people to understand is you got to work with the dog, and you got to work with the best you can in as controlled environment as you can. There's so much you can do in your home or by you in the backyard before going in a busier street. to get them comfortable and work on things to build that confidence and trust. A leash on in the house. We could talk a little about tethering, but in general, I want people walking their dog around the house as an exercise.
Yeah.
Nelson talks about have them do it 3 times. Yep. See if you can have your dog follow you around the house in the same pattern 3 times. If they can't, it tells you about your relationship with the dog and your communication on leash. If you can, great. Then have them maybe walk up over a bed and different things like that. But a lot
like
of times
in between the in like smaller areas, like in between the couch and the coffee table.
Yep.
Things like that will tell you a lot. I mean, not just about fearful dogs, but some dogs are like, I'm not following you around the house on a leash. Exactly. And that tells you something too, right?
A lot of them won't go into the kitchen area, I find too. So one of the things I've done, and we can talk about use of food, so I definitely want to bring this up in our time, and it's something anybody can do in a home with their dog. So how you use food, especially with a fearful dog, especially for me in the city, helps. I mean, dogs need to eat. I don't want to starve them, but we can use their meal to gain trust. And again, as Nelson said, I thought we were going to do a clicker every time I say Nelson, but a dog using their nose, a dog in movement, happy dog. So if I can get them moving and using their nose, less of their eyes, and I can take myself out of the situation, I can help them. So some of the things I have them do is take their meal. And if you could raise the value of the meal instead of treats, great. If you want to use treats, great. But if you could feed their meal, and I do use Stella and Chewy's meal mixers because it's high value, it's quality, they like it. Or something a little stinkier, okay? Cheese. But I use the salmon and cod sometimes of the Stella and Chewy's meal mixers, but whatever, cold cuts, cheese. I know you like potato chips. But better we can use their meal so they don't eat their meal and then don't want that. But whatever you can use to motivate the dog, and just make a food trail. Put a line from the crate somewhere, go sit down and let them be. Have time. That goes well, make a different pattern. That's easy. Make them go under a chair, under a table, over a bed. Put some clothes, just laundry, over that. Start building confidence of using their nose and just following the food and take yourself out of it. So it's a nice exercise.
That's the important part.
What?
I said, that's the important part. Describe how that looks, Jason, because I've seen you do it, but other people may not.
And one day I'll get some videos out of it that I recorded. So if you're in an area you're comfortable in, so if it's the living room, maybe they're not there yet or they're in a crate, just put a row of food down. Okay, make it easy, very close to each other. And it could be a mixture. If they'll work for kibble, great. But if you want something higher value, make a row of the food, think Hansel and Gretel, and then go sit down on the couch and give them time. You might see them take one piece and go, ooh, that was a lot. Okay? Watch their back feet. You'll see their back feet stretch. I don't know if I trust that, and go back. But there's no pressure of how long it's going to take to eat that food. They can take a piece and go away and come back. But make it easy. Put a row of food down. Let them do it. Set amount of time. If it doesn't work, take it away, and you can put them away. But if you just take the time while you're watching TV, doing something else, make a row of food and have them do it. But one thing, if you're watching TV, don't have something that's going to have some loud noises and scare your dog.
Yeah, you can't have like the dog comes out and grabs the food and there's a touchdown and you're like, yeah, that'll scare them to death.
And the other thing is, if the food trail works, you can use it for going out the door, going out the room, coming out of the crate. And then you can make the trail of the pattern that you want when you're walking the dog, and then hold the leash and follow them on that trail. But that's a little bit on the food trail. It's something that we were talking about the other day. Be creative, but also give your dog time. And one mistake I've seen people do is they have the trail come right to the person. That's a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
Take the trail, take it away. Eventually there. Don't cheer them on. Take yourself out of the equation. Make it be about the food and moving, and let them be. I do
And
have
don't try
some
to like,
videos on some stuff like this. Yes.
don't try to like sneaky watch them either, because they'll know if you're like, you know, reading a book but really watching the dog
Well,
will
if they look
know.
at you, look away. You know, that's what we
Yeah.
talked about. And the looking away thing, the funny thing I tell my students is, especially when it's a couple, if you met each other for the first time and you just, one of you stared at the other person and they caught you staring and you kept staring, this relationship's not going to happen. You're weird. But if that person caught you staring, you looked away, oh, he likes me. Okay? So, same type of thing. Like, don't challenge the dog with just staring, reaching over, bending. Again, it's a lot of social pressure. So step away, help the dog.
I
So
think
that's
a
one thing
lot of
I do
times,
think is good. Sorry, yes.
yeah, I think a lot of times people do things to dogs they wouldn't do to other people.
100%.
So it's like, think of if you met a person for the first time, like you said, would you just stare at them? Would you go, oh, you're so cute, come here, little pup, you know, like,
Oh, I like
just,
your hat. Let me try it on. What?
yeah. So a lot of the like polite social rules with people also apply to dogs. But I think for some reason people forget that because dogs are cute. I mean, let's face it, right? And for some reason they forget about those boundaries when they're interacting with dogs.
So, like we were saying before, talk about food real quick, is I like using food, but I like food as motivation. Yes, it seems like bribery, but there should be a goal of not needing the food eventually. Rewarding a good job or using it as motivation rather than, because I hear people all the time, oh, I go here, here's the food, they don't come over. And the big thing I want to talk about food, just because your friend, family member, you gave food to a fearful dog, doesn't mean you're buddies, doesn't mean they trust you. Thanks
No,
for the food. You're not a bad person. I like the food. I don't trust you yet. And it's a big thing I see. Well, they took food. We're good. Now I can pet the dog. And that's what you're saying. Food doesn't equal trust.
no, no. And I use it, you know, quite a bit after that initial. And also, I mean, usually I meet these dogs at the shelter. Like, there's just no way I can do some of the stuff at the shelter because of all the barking. I mean, there's just a lot of things, right? But when I bring them home, I do use it. You know, like people come over, I'll have them give my dogs, give like Hawkeye and Tipton treats, or I do it to teach obedience, or I've used it to get a dog used to a fearful floor, or all kinds of things like that. But yeah, I think it's important to kind of not use it to meet the goal you want, which is the dog liking you or trying to pet it.
Let's talk about petting for a second.
Yeah. So, well, and like, you know, I mean, it does, I'm not going to say it doesn't work with strangers in particular, because like dogs are opportunists, and it is kind of a bridge that the dogs will form a different association with a person that's maybe sitting on my couch and they're not so sure of. But yeah, like you said, if that person gets up and walks around or tries to go and put a leash on them or something, they're still going to be afraid of them. So,
well,
yeah.
I mean, when you were talking about with petting too, and people think, oh, because you took food or because you sniffed me or because you gave me a little kiss, now, free range, now I can go and pet you. Yeah. And what I tell them, even if they take food and they're hanging out for food, what I do is I'll leave my hand there. If they keep their head, I'll do a little underneath scratch, whatever. What a lot of people do is go right over the head.
Right.
Okay? And again, over the head, they can feel more trapped. So if they come into here and I scruff underneath, they can easily back away. Once you go over the head, it's again putting them in a more defensive state. Now, I'll have dogs that then will give me the bottom of the head or turn and give me their body or their rear end and say pet there. That's different, okay? But a lot of people are just reaching, hey, sniff my hand or go this. Yeah. Like I might put my hand closer so they don't come close. There's a big difference than here, sniff. And think about it. Go to your, that first time you meet somebody and go, hi. Really? How is that friendly? Okay? So, you know, like you said, a lot of the social...
With my hand, sniff it.
Yeah, sniff it. But a lot of social cues you wouldn't do with a person you don't know. There you go.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, I always want to bring up when talking about fearful dogs is, think of any of your friends that are, or you, that are really, really introverted. Or you're in a situation where you don't know anybody and maybe don't even speak the language. What would you be comfortable with? And a lot of times we don't consider the dog doesn't understand you, trying to read your body language, okay, new situation. And as Nelson again says, we're giants to a lot of them, okay, except for the 135-pound Great Dane I saw the other day. He's
Right.
taller than me, but still, you know, so a lot of the stuff we do with our body language, too much. So looking at our time, I want to speak briefly on meds. Okay. And again,
I want to point out one thing about the food you said that I think is really important. And you were talking about allowing the dog to come to you or to make its own decision. And I mean, that's how I work with the fears, the specific fears too, is I don't put a piece of food down on a slippery floor and like make the dog go get it. I kind of put it around and we play a game, and maybe I'll use another dog and we walk around and the dog kind of finds it, right? And so it's more of the dog's choice to move towards that and engage with that. They're kind of guiding. And I certainly don't want to interfere too much. Now, if the dog is totally refusing or, you know, I don't know, I might like give them a little guidance. It's okay to walk on the floor thing, but it's, yeah, like the dog has a say in it, right?
Yes,
we're not
100%.
forcing them. And I think that's an important part of how you use it as well.
Yeah, well, I use a lot of things I do. One thing I do, I got from Chad Mackin. He calls it the Leaky Toddler. I know they always make you think of something else, but Leaky Toddler, and it's basically like a toddler, dropping food, and the dog like eats it. Love this kid. And, you know, food just drops. But what I like about it is, well, I'll go back the first step. What I first do is we'll have people sitting, and I'll do a treat-retreat or food. I'll toss a piece of food further away, and they can eat it or not. And then maybe they'll get closer, and I'll toss food closer. Maybe they'll take it from my hand, but I just lean my hand, and if they want to take it, great. If not, I drop it. And eventually they'll come to me, I'll toss food away. They come back, food away again. I'm not asking anything from you. I don't need to pet you or nothing. That's one. The other thing is standing up, I might just toss food and not add movement, and that's more Leaky Toddler. And they can just eat it. I'm not petting, I'm not talking, I'm not interacting. Then we can add movement to it too, where, hey, food's falling, no one's asking anything from you, no one's trying to interact with you, but hey, good stuff's happening. And it's taking, again, ourselves out of the equation and taking out the expectations from what people normally do to them. I work with some fearful dogs and dogs with some bite history, but and we use touch. But we use touch in a way of go say hi. And at a Tyler Muto workshop I was at, they used it wonderfully where the dog was too uncomfortable going near other people. But once it understood, all I have to do is touch the person's hand, come back to you and get a piece of food. It was rushing up to people to do it. But what is the parameter? The new person, not all you have to do is touch their hand. They're not going to try to pet you. You don't have to get food from them. You okay with the camera now?
Well, hang on. I have someone messaging me that's trying to access this.
Just go to
and they can't find it. And
yeah. They'll watch it later then. It'll be up later. You just go to the Facebook page and it scroll down.
Sorry, so it keeps popping up on my screen, which is why I keep doing that. So
no worries. Nelson, by the way, said, good talk, guys. Gotta go now. Thanks. So thank you, Nelson, for sharing your knowledge and helping us help others. But again, so food can be used wrong, can be taken the wrong way. But everything you're doing, look at why you're doing it and what's the benefit and what are we asking of the dog in any situation. So unless you have something to add, I want to talk about meds and some things that we're seeing out there where, okay, dog's too fearful. Put it on meds, get a wee pad, don't take it out. Doesn't need to go outside, too scary. It's not a life for the dog. Now, I want to be clear, I'm not against meds. Pretty soon I might one day release my sort of case study success story with a dog where we are using meds. And I'm I'm very open for dogs using meds once we understand them first, and then see the meds have helped reaching the dog, clearing the head a bit, taking anxiety or anxiousness away, so then we can use training and done that. But sometimes I'm hearing and seeing, oh, just put the dog on meds before you even given them their 3 weeks to decompress, before you even tried to communicate any other way. So again, let's give them a chance. Let's try to build a relationship. And then, yeah, maybe meds, maybe a slip, maybe a pinch collar, maybe a head collar, maybe food. The dog will decide, and we'll see if we can help. So Cheryl just said, I had trouble finding it too, so I was late. And very interesting. Thank you, Cheryl. Once this is done, it'll still live here, and you can scroll back and check it out. And we'll try to do a better job if we do these again, working within the system and notifying people. It's sort of a little last minute. She was like, we need to do it live. I got things I want to say. I'm like, okay, let's go. So here it is. But we'll always try to do better if people are interested in this topic, which as I'm trying to move forward, there is a lot, and maybe we'll do one topic per as we move forward and other guests. So on the topic of use of meds, also on the topic of sheltering maybe the dog too much and those things that we wanted to discuss. I want to go on talk about that a little bit, too. Is that Tipton?
Yeah. I've learned, when I first started working with the really severe cases, I was worried about the dogs, I'll be honest about it, because even you put a leash on and even the slightest tension on that leash and the dog will, freak out, right? And I've learned, one, dogs are very resilient creatures. Mm-hmm. And most of the time they are just doing that to themselves, and I'm just holding the leash. I'm not even doing anything.
Looks worse than it is.
Yeah. And it's because they're afraid and they're trapped and they have this sensation they've never had and all this stuff. It seems once they work through that, they get, I think, and I don't know a lot about body chemistry, so I'm not using the proper terminology or anything, but just even being out of the kennel and moving in some way really seems to help the dogs. I've gotten feedback from the shelter that after I work with the dogs once, and yeah, they may freak out on leash, or they may be real scared and cling to the fence, or something like that. They're sitting up in their kennel more. They're watching what's going on more. When I go back, they're more willing to work with me. And so I always use what I call positive results training, whereas the dog is improving. I think people get too wrapped up in which quadrant what they're doing fits in, and somehow that means it's ethical or not. And what's more ethical, drugging a dog and having it stay inside its whole life and use pee pads, or having it go through half an hour of stress on a leash so it can go outside and begin that process to healing? For me, I want the dog to get over that initial, really intense fear as fast as possible, because I don't want that dog, again, to get in the habit of being in that mindset in my house. And they can do it. I've seen it happen over and over and over. where, after 3 sessions, a dog is pretty good on leash. Now, that means in a very quiet environment, which in the city I know is harder, or maybe just in the court outside of my house. And then we gradually have to increase those circles of trust, right? And honestly, I've never drugged a dog at this stage because we don't have the resources to do so.
Yep.
And, that would mean loading the dog up in a crate, driving it all the way to Santa Fe, having it get out of the crate, see a vet, have it get back in the car, and all of those are chances the dog could be lost as well. And it costs money.
Yeah.
So anyway, I haven't done it. I wouldn't say I'm opposed to it if it would help the dog, especially if it's in a home. I know I've done some research just preparing for this, and all the research I've done says that the drugs do not work if there's no behavior modification. So if you just drug the dog and expect it to somehow change, that's not going to work.
Right.
And the behavior modification, of course, has to be something that's going to actually help the dog, and not enable the dog.
Well,
so that's kind of my experience.
Something we're talking about on a topic, okay, we're talking about is behavior modification. And when it's in a home, it's a lot easier. We were talking about yesterday, which I wanted to make sure we bring up, is about keep moving forward.
Yeah.
And you talked about leash techniques, right? And one thing that's really hard when you have a fearful dog is it takes longer, much longer, smaller steps. I like to say baby steps to success. If anybody's ever seen What About Bob with Bill Murray, if you haven't, watch it. Good dark comedy. But you got to take small steps to bigger goals. And one of the things we were talking about, is you got to get over that hump. But if you never get over that hump of just getting out of the house, then you can't get around the corner. So a lot of people, when they get a dog, let's just go for a long walk. Well, how about just getting outside? I have my students just hang out and feed their meal, have a coffee, and wake up at 6 a.m., 5 a.m., wake up, feed your dog something, you go back to bed, but it's quiet, okay?
Yeah.
Or in the city, if you have a terrace or a deck, or go to the rooftop when it's a little quieter, not as busy. Outside, just walk. We talk about inside the house, just up and down the street.
Right.
That's it. Maybe up and down the street, cross the street. And that's it. Eventually get more and more. Back to those doing something 3 times, building that habit, right? But take it slow. There's no rush. There's no race. But if you take the slow steps and build that trust and the foundation and keep moving forward, then you can. I met somebody one time in an elevator, like, oh, you're Canine Cohen. I want to work with you. Like, okay, well, I got availability. Just go to my site. Oh, no, I can't yet. The dog's not allowed outside. It's still, it has to first be inside on meds for 6 months, and then, and listen, you could do both. I see it in Facebook groups. I get the apps. The dog can't walk. We have to help them move. And sometimes it's not so pretty, but we've got to take small steps. And something Nelson talks about is safe spots. Okay. So I look at his baseball. Okay. You're walking, and in the city, maybe we get 3 trees down, 1 house down, take a break, sit with them, take the moment, then another one. Okay. But give them little breaks and then keep moving forward. Every walk can be better. So something we talked about to achieve that, we have to have the right intent, what was that word you talked about? Premonition, okay?
Envision. I said I envision what's going to happen.
Right? You have the right intent. We're going to go for a walk.
Yeah.
You got to envision. We're going to do this. Have the right techniques that are going to help the dog to help you communicate appropriately.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times food's not going to work when you're outside at that early stage. They do great. Life's easier. And then the right tools. And the tool might be a martingale, a slip, might be a head holder, might be a pinch. Yes. Pinch collar can help sometimes. I mostly will use a slip leash, a martingale. I really like Heather Beck's or Heather Heroes now Sidekick, used to call transitional leash. That is one of my favorite tools. But you find the best tool for the owner and the dog. Could you use a harness? Sure. But it's a lot easier for the dog just to sit in a harness. And then a lot of people use a front clip harness where when the dog stops, it pulls the shoulders together and then it makes it harder for them to move forward. So you got to find the right tool with the problem your dog's having.
And with the harness, there's all these points of contact, right? And so you're getting, to me, with a leash, it's much clearer because there's like one area of contact. And I will say, we have a lot of transports going through New Mexico and they switch vans here. You know how many dogs get out of harnesses? A lot.
Oh, yeah.
So, you know, if you're going to use a harness, and I'm not saying I won't, because there are dogs I have used them on because just the collar was, they just couldn't deal with a collar, but I backed it up, right, to a collar. Yeah. So
listen, before I meet students, I'm like, just use a backup harness, just wait them out. We'll work on the techniques and the tools. And yes, like you mentioned, I have a guide on my site, backup collars. So if you have a fearful dog, I also recommend a FI or GPS collar can help.
Yeah.
The other thing that we were talking about, which is very important working with fearful dogs, is patience, persistence, and perseverance, something Heather Beck talks about a lot. You have to have more patience than the dog has perseverance. I always mess up her actual quote, but it's all around the same idea. You know, have more patience than pressure. Take those breaks, but move forward. Yes, go on. Sorry.
I think people think, well, and this with any dog behavior issue they're working on is that, you know, a walk has to be a longer distance. But, you know, if it takes you 10 minutes maybe to get out the front door of your house with a fearful dog, and you do it in a way that the dog, you take the time, you let the dog survey the environment out the front door, you're also surveying the environment with the dog, and then just gently go out the door. And if that took me 10 minutes and I had to be to work and I had half an hour, our walk would be shorter. But that foundation is, you know, super important to build the foundation. And then back to what you were saying about intent, I think a lot of people are afraid they're somehow going to damage the dog by just making them maybe, I don't know, go out the front door or something like that. And let's face it, sometimes they just have to jump in the deep end of the pool and just go out the door for whatever reason. But you know, it's not being afraid you're going to hurt the dog doesn't have the right intent, because that's what's in your head is fear. And so the dog can't follow someone that's fearful. So maybe, like, I don't know, plan ahead, have something in your head of what you're going to try and do it with confidence. And confidence doesn't mean arrogance or domination or that, I don't know, you know, those sorts of things. It can be very gentle and like very calm, but you're still confident in what you're doing. And I think that might help a lot of people.
It also goes back to techniques and use of leash. I work with students and dog won't move. I grab the leash, dog moves. I had a student the other day, and they had a dog, they couldn't walk outside. And they're using leash too, and it's all great. And they had a friend that the dog wouldn't walk. He just grabbed the leash, used exactly the same techniques that I taught him, and there goes the dog.
Yeah.
So, but he also has the intent because he knows it works. He's like, we're going to do this. We're going to go for a walk, and bam, dog walked. So the intent is more, we're going to do this. Have faith in me to show you. And I talk to the students, it's not about being alpha. Be their parent, mentor, guide, leader to our crazy human world. So the city's scary. but it's a city. I mean, our
Yeah.
friend Kevin Lee, I was hanging out with him, great trainer out of California, from Jersey, but he was hanging with me the other day, and we're walking down Fifth Ave, and it's actually real quiet. It wasn't much for me. There wasn't really an ambulance. You hear me on the phone.
Right.
But there was a little construction, popping of balloons, and he was like, the hell? He goes, man, I don't like it here. Okay? But think about a dog that just got here. Subways
Yeah.
underneath. All this stuff going on. So take the time to let them take all that in,
Yeah.
hang out with them, and then take a few more steps.
Yeah.
So what you were saying before, it's not about the length of the walk, the time of the walk, it's the quality of the walk and what you got out of it. And I was true that outside their house is the most fearful they are. We have to work on that because you're not moving. You stop for a while. So work on just outside being comfortable, back and forth, repetition.
Yeah.
Something we were talking about the other day. Good dog training is boring. The boring
Very
stuff.
boring.
Todd McVicker says, good dog training is like watching paint dry.
Yeah.
Okay? So, and especially with fearful dogs, it's all about that. So, I understand the use of meds, I understand the use of food, but what's our goal with it, and is it working, and how can we improve it? Sometimes you need a little more meds, sometimes you need a little more pressure, sometimes you need a lot more patience, sometimes you need higher value food. And this is why, again, working with it, not trying to promote working with trainers, but, get with someone that's been there, done that before, and that's what they work with.
Yeah.
And that's what they do. To help
Whipped
guide
cream.
you. What?
Whipped cream is also a good motivator.
Well, that's what isn't that what the Starbucks uses in the
pup cups.
or whatever? The main things I use also is cheese. I know Byron, who chimed in, Byron does, he uses Manchego cheese. I use mozzarella cheese.
Oh,
Stick.
cheese.
I
Fancy.
that just used up turkey, recently cold cuts.
Yeah.
Cut up chicken. Whatever you can use to motivate is great. And just get the dog moving forward. Get over the first hump so they can go to the next one and then get over the hill.
Yeah.
So,
and I think
and your dog
maybe
is what? Sorry.
Well, and like when we're talking about walking on leash, I think so we're not concerned about the dog healing or anything like that. Literally, my goal at first is to get the dog to move on a leash, and it might be totally chaotic and scattered, and I just follow the dog, but it's moving, right? And then, like, probably by the time an adopter gets it, because hopefully rescues wouldn't adopt out a dog that can't walk on a leash, although I know it happens. I had a lady that lives the street over and the shelter adopted her a totally feral dog. And luckily she knew me and I went and helped her. Dog's doing great now, but come on, don't adopt out dogs like that, guys. Let's, or at least give support to the people that adopt them, which, is what the rescue work with.
Canine rescue, because that's what they do. They set the dogs up for success. And and I know Badass does training with the fosters. I work with them, and yes, I'm plugging them, but they do the right thing. There's a lot of great rescues out there. These are a few that I work with, but when you work with people that do the right thing to support the dogs, support the fosters, I want to support them.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, but the walks can be chaotic and the dog can kind of want to sniff things. That's actually good. Like at the initial stages, I wouldn't stop any of that. I kind of, after a week or two and the dog is much more comfortable, then I'm going to set a few boundaries. And honestly, with the fearful dogs I still have in my house, I'm not as strict with them as I was with some of my other dogs on their leash behaviors, because my main goal is to have them be happy and well behaved, not, in a perfect heel, for example. So.
Well, for me, it's a little different in the city.
Well, true.
When I work with people with fearful dogs and we're going for the first walk, I'm telling them, I'm not trying to get a perfect heel. I'm just going to try also not let the dog. It depends what they're doing. Are they exploring and sniffing a bit? I will give a new dog, fearful dog, I want them to sniff more. But I also don't want them basically going to flight. So
Exactly.
again, are they running away, running back, or are they using their nose a bit? So I'll definitely give a newer dog, a dog that more chance to sniff and more opportunities. And then the other parts, I want them walking with me so I could be their rock that they can lean on when that scary stuff happens, and that goes back to each communication. But the hardest part in the city when you're doing these walks is everything's going well, and there comes a bus, and
right,
there comes a this, and there comes a that. So, you know,
it happens here too occasionally.
Yeah, once a year. Yeah.
No, my first walk was Chardonnay. I came out of the house, and she was pretty scared when I got her. The neighbor's garage door went up, and then it was like trash day, and then we go around the corner, and out here they use flamethrowers to kill the weeds.
Oh.
So yeah, that was all like in the first block of her first walk with me. So it does happen. Not that was unusual though.
Well, on your point of letting them sniff, garbage day is a great day. You gotta be careful.
Oh yeah.
But it is a good day to let them sniff, but you gotta watch what they're sniffing. People love to just throw out their wings, not necessarily in it, but that's the thing. You gotta be careful with what they're sniffing and
eating.
Because next thing you know, you get explosive diarrhea from the hot sauce or other things. So and you don't know, especially if you have a dog that's more feral or more of a dog that lives on the street, what they'll put in their mouth, like Hawkeye, or just grab anything, right?
Yeah.
So
especially dead things.
So let me look what we got here. So we talked a bit about that. I think it's maybe just wrap this up. It's about an hour. I know people checked in. I'm not seeing really questions unless it's not working well, so I'm not seeing them. So I did have one of my students in my Facebook group ask, so I will address it. And I think it was more about fear of the bus, the school bus, the regular bus, the garbage truck. How do we do that? Work with a trainer, that's one. But if the dog takes food, I do use food to change associations.
Yes.
But a lot of these dogs won't take food, so then I can't. What I do is try to give them space because, again, dogs do communicate with space. I try to give them space. I do have them. I use leash communication, leash tension to get them sit because I can't let them run away and we can't always get away.
Right.
I teach them, hey, chill out here. You can sniff. I'm not going to let it harm you. And then once I can get them to take food, I will use food to counter condition. Jessica said, I asked the question on the group. There's Jessica. You can write it again here, Jessica, so I can try to answer it. But counter conditioning is more what I do to change associations from negative to positive. I use markers in food once I can get the dog in a calmer position. And it's all about threshold. So if the dog is taking food, don't wait till the bus is right there.
Right.
So I get the dog calm position, usually in a sit, not obedience. I use tension on the leash. They chill out. I call it the chill out cue. The dog's here, and the trigger's here, and the dog will take food here. I start marking and rewarding here as the trigger gets closer and goes away.
Yeah.
Because if the trigger's here and the dog won't take food, well, too late. Do your best to give it space and not let it go to flight. The thresholds are important. And what I tell my students a lot is when you're walking your dog, take these life's moments and turn them into training opportunities.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
How do you do that? Have that high value food, something you know they'll eat. On your walk, have the intent. We're going to work on this trigger. I know there's a bus that comes in. I know it's this. I'm going to stop far enough away where the dog is not going to react. And I'll stop marking and rewarding and change associations. Eventually, the dog goes, ooh, that's scary too. Ooh, that gets me food. Ooh, could that go again? Because I like the food. So you change from scary to positive to neutral. Okay? Yeah. skateboards, all different triggers. But first, we have to build the foundation of, can the dog walk with me? Comfortable enough to take food? Charging the marker so they understand what that means. It's when I mentioned earlier, I had one of my students just sit outside and feed the dog breakfast on their stoop.
Yeah.
If the dog won't eat food down there, where if you could just sit there and eat food as life goes by, and I posted a video recently about that, great. And then what can we do at the corner? Can we do it other places? But first start in the home, then get different locations and build that association. So Jessica, I'm not seeing the question. Hopefully that sort of answered it.
Well, and there's this
DM
great
me,
app.
I can do that too, but yes.
I have people either record the noise
Oh,
on
yeah.
their phone, or there's an app that you can, I think it's $5, that makes all kinds of noises.
Puppy training. Yep.
And, yeah, and so you work with just the sound initially. And I know you can't always control the world, right, as much as we'd like to when we're working with these dogs. But, you know, like you said, if you know a bus comes at 8 a.m., you know, maybe for a few days in a row, that's your goal with your dog, is to go out, get there at 7:45 and, you know, work with the dog far enough away so they can have some sort of success with that bus or whatever it is.
Jessica, I just want to continue your point that Jessica does have a question. So,
okay.
Yes, there's an app, Soundproof Puppy Training is
yes,
great app. It has a bunch of sound. YouTube also. What I've done is if the dog's good in the crate, while they're eating their meal, I might play it on the app or on YouTube at a lower volume and then increase it of that.
Yeah.
I've done it for baby crying, city noises. People say do it for fireworks, you can. But here's the challenge. The sound is only one aspect.
Yes,
the noise, the vibrations, and
feeling
of it. So, but it's a great place to start. So Jessica said, can you address how a dog might take treats or food at first from the hand? As they get to know you more, they back off. So let me say that again. Can you address how a dog might take treats or food at first from the hand, but as they get to know you more, they back off? Well, it's all, how are you giving the food? And if this is your dog and then they're backing off, how long have you had the dog? Okay. So maybe initially you just, here's the food, and now you're like, you want food. I see people all the time like, here's food. And then they chase it and try to almost like the airplane with the kid in the mouth with the food. And the dog's like, I really don't want it. Other times it could be you're standing up and you're reaching down. You take food. So again, put yourself in the vision of the dog, and that's pretty scary, reaching down. Some dogs, if they were comfortable and then not, and look at other aspects. Are they comfortable in general? Has something changed? Have any big life changes? Medically, are they feeling well? Then we talk about clarity of communication. We look at layers of stress. So we have to look at all aspects of the dog, the life, and our relationship. Yes, Julie?
Well, like, is there a thunderstorm rolling in that you don't know about?
Yep.
I mean, yeah, it would be all these things. Maybe if you live in an apartment building, there's construction going on a floor that you can't even hear.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I would be with you, though. I'd want to make sure, like, is there something that's changed in the way you're giving the food? Or have you changed the food even?
Yep.
I mean, maybe the dog's like, you're not giving me the good chicken anymore. I'm not taking the kibble from you. I mean, that can happen.
You know. And what I do when I offer food to a dog, I'll back up here for a bit. When I do that treat and retreat, I'll basically put the food here and on my knee or whatever, and the dog comes and takes it. If it doesn't, I'll just drop it down.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm just neutral and I put the food. And then they get a choice to come get it or not, and then I'll drop it down. So in everything, when I'm training with dogs, if something's not working, go back a step to something that did, maybe 2 steps, and then go forward.
Yes.
Also, age your dog. Sometimes, you know, if there's a puppy and all of a sudden now you're at 7, 8 months, there's a They say there's a third fear period, and maybe there's something going on with a fear period going on there. So there's a lot of variables to why, and that's why we were saying in training, it depends. If you have to follow up on that, you want to add, but hopefully that
A
gives you
video.
something to look at.
A video of the dog and her giving the food would be a good place to start.
Yeah, I mean, it's for the training world, and she's 3 and was on the streets for probably 2 years. Okay, well, how long have you had her? So she's 3 years old, was on the street for 2 years. I'm assuming you've had her for a year, based on what you're saying.
Was she super skinny at first?
Yeah.
Maybe she was super hungry, and now she's not. I don't know.
And you're noticing, if you want, go back, instead of just using treats, start hand feeding her meals a bit. A year and a half, I will have to message separately later. Okay, let to answer if I can. But try just hand feeding her meals, But again, not here's your food, just more take the food and let her come and eat it out of your hand and reaching into you. Okay? Makes sense? So yes, that's one question. But that's something I'll just cover briefly again as I went quickly with that. I got Chad Mackin has taught me, and I've learned from Chad and Jay and Sarah all gone over this in workshops. So Chad Mackin, Jay Jack, and Sarah Dixon is layers of stress. So when something all of a sudden changes in our dogs, look at the layers of stress. So the first thing we want to look at is medical. Is something wrong? Are they not feeling well? Could be a toothache, could be an earache, could be a stomach ache, whatever. So first is medical. Next thing, and again, sorry, Chad, if I'm not doing this exactly right. The next thing a lot of times we want to look at is big life changes. Did you move? Did someone else move in? Were you just away? Is there a new baby? So a lot of life changes that could happen. The other thing would be clarity of communication. How you communicate via the leash, via your voice, expectations. How clear are we with what our expectations are with the dog? Those are the
Are you getting frustrated?
Yeah. So Jessica added a little more. She said she was, and says she gained weight. She did take treats and was being hand fed from her trainers. And then as she got to know them more, she refused anyway. Okay. Well, the trainers that did that, I talked to them a bit, but yeah, that's interesting. Go on, Julie. Sorry.
Well, remember we said food doesn't equal trust?
Yep.
So this is why I don't build a relationship based on food, and yep. I feed my fearful dogs in a crate, or, in a place they feel safe. And I want that trust to be with me first, not with the food. So perhaps there was never a really trustworthy relationship built. I don't know. I mean, I'm just guessing. But I see that a lot in the dogs at the shelter, is that if you overuse food and the dog only understands interacting with people when food is present, and then when you take away the food, you've just changed a huge variable, and the dog they literally don't understand that it's the same person and you want the same thing because the food isn't there.
Well, what does the food mean to the dog? So when she's saying the trainers, she knew them when she refused anyways. Well, was she eating her meal any other ways? What pressure or social pressure was it with hand feeding the food? And as she gained weight, maybe you're feeding her kibble, she's like, I'm full enough.
She's not hungry enough.
And then if she didn't eat it from your hands, did then she get it in the crate? Did she get it somewhere else? She's like, I'd rather eat it that way. So what are you asking of them from the food? And what's the relationship with it? Okay?
And I would say to her, try building the relationship without using food, because obviously there's some kind of thing going on, and you certainly can do it. I think, well, and this is one of the reasons why I wanted to do this, is, you know, I'm on some Facebook pages and I see a lot of posts from trainers saying, I'm working with a fearful dog and they won't take food. What do I do?
Mm-hmm.
So even trainers are, how do I say this, limited maybe in understanding how to work with fearful dogs. And it really, I mean, again, and like I said, I've had so much opportunity to work with them. That's kind of become something I'm probably more comfortable with than a lot of other people. But all I can say is that the food isn't necessary, but you do have to think out of the box a little bit and really decide, figure out that dog and how you can connect with that dog. And personally, I do a lot of watching my dogs and how they interact with fearful dogs when I bring a new dog in. And that's helped me a lot. So, you know, it's just like with people, if you do something, let's say Jason and I go out and train some dogs together, right?
Yeah.
Like, or we're going to have a better understanding of each other and some trust built. And so if I go out with a fearful dog and do some, I don't know, some little adventure with them, and again, it might be teeny tiny for us, but huge for the dog, that dog's going to have a little bit more trust in me, like, I don't know, climbing on a rock or
But that's what I was
something.
gonna say. I mean, there's other things you can do to build relationship, and it's not food. It's
Yeah.
environmental agility. The walk is relationship. So Jessica did add, 'cause I know you're not seeing the comments. She goes, yes, and I have that trust. She is amazing off leash. I think she likes food, but she could have cared less. I guess I wonder if she had abuse and or was captured from the streets, traumatizing for her. I mean, listen, it can be traumatizing, but the big thing we say, working a fearful dog, that was yesterday. We got to worry about tomorrow. Her not wanting to take food. Some dogs' food isn't that valuable. I had a dog that water was more valuable, and that was a motivation.
Right.
The fact that she won't take something from your hand is a trust thing. Okay? So why she's sort of not taking food from you, it might be she just doesn't want that food, and I have to see sort of a video of how she's taking the food. But that your dog just might not be food motivated. I had a dog that wouldn't take food because it was too fearful, and what we did for recall was chase. Like, oh,
Right.
chase. We tap and have the dog chase and play with us, and
Yeah.
that was great. And then the dog wanted to interact more with the human. So can't always use food, and there's other ways to build a relationship. I know your initial question was, why won't she take food from you rather than I need to use food to motivate her? That was your initial question. And the fact that a dog won't take something from your hand is a trust issue. Okay? So the fact that you have a good relationship and she's great off leash and maybe she listens, but if you want to offer something, she's like, I won't take it from you. I do want to look deeper into why you won't take something. The first thing I do is I drop it and see if they'll eat it then. If you offer food and they drop it, then they eat it, well, that's a relationship issue. Dog doesn't trust you to take it out of your hand, but they'll take it from the floor. And that's something I'd want to work on more to have that trust. Okay? Because sometimes we have to give a dog a pill, and sometimes we, you know.
I've had, you know, my dog Annie, not food motivated, not motivated by much. She didn't have a lot of prey drive. She didn't have a lot of food drive, but she did have a lot of pack drive.
Yep.
So, you know, of course I used food to train her and we did nose work, but she wouldn't, and again, she was a pet. Okay. So, but she would not find the odor unless I had something really good, like salami.
Okay.
If I used her kibble, no way.
Yep.
Right? So, you know, that's a consideration too. Like, is the food actually something she loves?
Yeah, whiskey, over there, whiskey dog. I thought you kibble for training. No.
Yeah.
No, eat kibble, but yeah. So Jessica answers, yep, she eats it when I drop it. Thank you so much for the time and attention in this chat. I appreciate it. Well, Jessica, thank you for asking the questions. right now we're not getting many, so glad to answer yours and any help we can. I'd also reach out if you have trainers you work with that work with her, see if they can help you take the next step as well. But,
and I love puzzle questions like that. I love figuring that stuff out. So now I'm like, well, now I want to see a video. Now I want to see the dog and, just see what's going on because I'm curious. So sorry if we're droning on about your question.
If you want to DM me or we'll put more of the information on the bottom. We'll link it out later. Sorry, I'm mumbling here, babbling. But we'll put info. You could just DM me. I'll get it to Julie as well. But yeah, if you want to send a video, what's going on? She said she'll share later for sure. But other trust building exercises is good, and those things can help build trust in other ways.
Yeah.
I think on that note, we're about an hour and a half. Well, we didn't start exactly doing this right on time, but I think that's a good way to wrap it up. And if you guys like this, and again, you can catch it later. Julie, if you want to just quickly tell them how they can find you.
So I have a couple different ways. I have a dog training business, which is Hart to Hart Canine, because my last name's Hart. I have a website, Rescue Dogs Responsibly. And then I also have some online courses about fostering, adopting, and rehabilitating fearful dogs on fearfuldoghelp.org. And of course, I'm happy to answer any questions. You can find me on Facebook. Shoot me an email, whatever.
And let us know, even people that may be watching this later on the replay, if you like this and you want more, me and Julie will try to do a better job next time of reorganizing so it shows up in the feed, all the technical stuff. But we're
working with technical problems.
Specific topics. Yes, what, Julie?
I said technical problems on my end.
My end too. I've never done this directly through Facebook with two people. So, but we're happy to do more of these, and if they can help, because I know we all understand living with a fearful dog can be tough and